All right, well, welcome back everyone at the Cooperative Trust. We are going to go ahead and start part 2 of our conversation on servant leadership with Tony Hernandez. So thank you everyone so much for your flexibility. I was just sharing with Tony that in typical millennial fashion, I have to try the most technologically advanced things possible when sometimes the simplest solution is always best. So to go ahead and finish off this conversation, I really wanted to share, what I really wanted was for Tony to share with all of you how his time in the military shaped his leadership style and how that really plays into servant leadership. It's such a special story. So Tony, why don't you go ahead and share with everyone how your time in the military has really shaped who you are today?
Yeah, well, one of the most important things I learned, throughout my military career, in a variety of leadership positions was, this is something I'll share with you all, and then maybe you can write some of this stuff down. But the main thing that I learned was to always be yourself and to find your own voice. And the reason why I taught that, or I was taught that, and I taught that to squadron commanders that served under my command, was that was recognizing that airmen in the United States Air Force, or soldiers in the Army, or Marines, or sailors in the Navy, they can always tell when whether or not their commander is authentic or whether or not their commander is a fraud. And so, let me relate a quick story, where I learned this. Back in 2003, I was assigned to the Pentagon, and I was in my 2-star's office, 2-star general, major general's office, for my final meeting before I was about to leave the Pentagon and go off to Korea to command my very first Air Force squadron. This general, his name was Steve Lorenz, was on his way to 4 stars. I knew him as a 2-star general, and he all went up to 4, which is the highest you can go. And so I really wanted his advice, as I was taking my first positional, of leadership, as a squadron commander. And so I asked this 2-star if, in his opinion, was it better for me to go into my squadron with my screws on tight and set a strong example, for all the airmen under my command, or would it be better to take a hands-off approach and let my leadership, slowly emerge and rise to the occasion? And all he said was, Major Hernandez, who was a major at the time, he says, just be yourself. Your airmen can tell the difference, and being anything otherwise, you would be labeled a fake. And worst case is that could cost you your command as people lose trust in you.
Yeah.
Now with the general, I'm sure he knew this, but what that meant to myself as a major coming out of the Pentagon was that, I really needed to figure out who I was, which sort of brings up, the rest of this conversation that we'll have as we go through this.
Awesome. All right. And which reminds me, I need to pull up my next question. Give me 1 second here. Oh my goodness. You all might notice too that I have a slight change in venue. In light of transparency, Tony, that is probably one of my biggest strengths and faults, is that I just share all the information with everyone. All right, so here we go. And then our final question, dealing with servant leadership, your experiences, what advice do you have for folks looking to enter into leadership that might really be new, or may not necessarily be new, but maybe they're just really looking to perhaps reinvent themselves or reinvest in their own leadership style?
Yeah, I guess the first thing, and this sort of comes off my last, vignette about, my personal experience taking my first command, and I'll expand on, being yourself and finding your voice. But the thing I want the foot stomping in the Air Force, when the instructor, did his foot stomp, that means pay attention, because that question was going to be on the test. And so anytime you heard the word foot stomp, that was pay attention. So let me foot stomp this. Leadership is not a position. Leadership is more a state of being. And, you could be the best leader and not have any position of authority at all, but because you're an authentic person and people are drawn to that, and I'll get into that a little bit, why that works, you are probably the real leader in that organization. And so I have a book I want to recommend where I'll share some some thoughts from some of the reading. And I know Courtney will probably put this up on the website later on, but
Yep.
it's a relatively new book, about 2 years old or so. And it's called Servant Leadership in Action. And the subtitle is How You Can Achieve Great Relationships and Results. And it's written by Ken Blanchard and Renee Broadwell. And within each of the chapters in the book are other leadership writers. And so one of my favorite pair of writers was James Kozes and Barry Posner. And in chapter 19, there's a chapter that's called Finding Your Voice. And so that's kind of where I'm going to draw a lot of what I'm about to tell you guys. And so here's another thing to write down, is that credibility is the foundation of leadership. And that gets back to authenticity. And then when we talk about finding your voice, there's lots of books out there. And one called Management of the Absurd, written by a psychologist and a CEO named Richard Farson. And I thought this was pretty pertinent, especially as I'm about to become a brand new grandfather in about 6 weeks. So I'm pretty excited. But listen to this. This came out of that book. He said, in both parenthood and management, it's not so much what we do as what we are that counts. What parents do deliberately appears to make little difference in the most obvious or most important outcomes, whether their children grow up to be happy or unhappy, successful or unsuccessful, good or evil. Now, there's no question that parents can and should do worthwhile things for their children, but it's what they are that will really matter. And I'd like to say, this same dynamic occurs whether you're in management and leadership. People will learn and they'll respond to what we are or what you are as brand new leaders. And so, as I'm excited to meet my granddaughter for the first time when she's born sometime in the next month, I plan on introducing myself to my granddaughter, either in holding her or placing my hands on her head and speaking to her in gentle but reassuring tones. Now, any child psychologist or pediatrician or even a teacher will tell you that the child has to be able to connect with your voice or your touch. And so, that statement is the core of becoming the leaders. And those of you who have met me before and have heard me talk about how important a handshake is, and believe me, COVID is ruining all this because you can't shake hands anymore. I hope we can get back to where we do that, because, when you shake someone's hand and look them in the eye, this gets back to credibility. It's about practicing what you preach, about looking people in the eye and actually doing what you say you will do. And so when you have that handshake, that meant something. But what I like about this chapter, it says there's clearly something more. There's a prior task to connecting your voice and touch. And as you can guess, that's finding your voice in the first place.
Sure.
Now remember, authentic servant leadership flows from the inside out. It does not come from the outside in.
Absolutely.
So inside out leadership is about discovering who you are, what drives you to do what you do, and it's what gives you credibility to lead others. It also makes you become the author of your own story. And I like the way they write this, the maker of your own history. And so think about what that implies as you write things down, or you leave your impression on those you intend to serve. And again, inside out leadership, which I believe is a core theme of servant leadership, is the only way to respond to what your people want from you. And what is it they want from you most? And so let me foot stomp this one more time. Let's write this down. What they want most is to know who you genuinely are. Think about that. People want to know who you are. And if they like what they see, they're going to follow you.
Yeah.
And there's very little you have to do to do that. But finding your voice is critical if you want to be a servant leader. If you don't find your voice, you may find yourself with a vocabulary, with a set of words, or a printed sheet of paper, that might have been written by a speechwriter or a ghostwriter, which is nothing like you at all.
Right.
Now, I encourage you all as you're becoming leaders, and you see this in most leadership training, is that you tend to read biographies or autobiographies, or you read about leadership philosophies from famous leaders. Some of them are experienced executives, some are dedicated scholars. There's tons of podcasts out there,
Oh,
like
yeah.
motivational speakers, or you can watch, different TED Talks, or you can sign up for and pay or participate in a variety of leadership training programs. That's all good. That sort of gives you a basis from which to, benchmark where you want to be. Another good idea is to volunteer or accept job assignments within your current, job right now, so that you can work alongside someone who can possibly coach you.
Yeah.
You do all this, so that you can master the fundamentals, add some different tools to your leadership tool belt, and along with some very impressive techniques.
Yeah.
But I will say, everyone is clumsy at first, and you will fail more than you succeed, but it's getting up and perfecting yourself to do that. And so, I always ask you, how many of you, when you don't, you answer this rhetorically, but how many of you have been there, done that, right? I still stumble from time to time, and so no one's perfect at doing this, but I still try. I still get out there and do what I can do. But to kind of carry on with that theme, as far as being authentic, after a certain period of time, everyone starts to discover that, you can give a speech with ease, or you can conduct a meeting with a certain amount of grace, or listen to others with, empathy and openness, and you can even praise employees with style, and that's important. But then something happens along the way, right? You tend to notice how that last speech sounded mechanically rote, or how that last meeting was, really, really more routine and boring, or how that last encounter you had with a fellow team member or someone you're trying to lead, how that was, that sort of left you feeling sad and empty because there's really no substance, and I think we all tend to awake sometime, just, when you sort of realize that, hey, those words aren't mine, and that technique it's not my technique. It's just something that I learned, and so I'm not really speaking straight from the heart, and that can be, that can be terrifying.
Oh, yeah.
You've invested so much time and energy into learning all the right things to do, but suddenly you see they're no longer working for you. It seems kind of hollow, and so I like what the writers write. You stare into the darkness of your inner territory and begin to wonder what lies inside. That sounds pretty bad, but I mean, what sort of gets you there is that, man, I'm not being who I am.
Right.
I'm not being who I am, and we've all been there. Sometimes I still wonder if this is the real me when I look in the mirror or I do a self-assessment, and so that's okay, because at least there's a disconnect there, and you can move on. And so, if you're doing that and you're finding yourself saying to yourself that I'm not exactly the person that management is trying to make me become, I'm a unique human being, but again, I ask you, who exactly are you, and what exactly is your true voice? And so, this awakens an intense period of internal exploration, where you go beyond technique, beyond training, or beyond, simply copying what great masters of leadership do, or taking the advice of others, but if you surrender to the fact that, something's changed, at least you can start making, a lot of broad strokes on, picture your leadership canvas and the self-portrait of yourself. You at least start to make some broad strokes for who you are for the very first time. And a picture begins to emerge of who you truly are. And so there's an exciting time as you take that inward journey and you make these rough sketches and you continue to work to finish your self-portrait. And that doesn't mean you forget about all the fundamentals and all the classes and all the books that you read or early on in your career. You still use those. Also, you shouldn't wait to have that, oh my gosh moment, I'm not quite measuring up. You could start that inward journey now.
Oh, yeah.
And so, the main point to share with you all is to merge the lessons from both your outer and inner journey so that you can become a better leader. And when you figure out who you are, you find that it's easy to start serving others, because now you're authentic. And now your happiness or your joy sort of exudes from your body and you speak with passion. you get results. And when you paint a vision, people don't think you're just mouthing some,
Right.
something you learned in seminar, right? It's a true vision that you're putting together, and people can buy into that. And so, if I was assigning homework today, and maybe I am, right? It'd be to
Yes,
ask,
assign away.
it would be for me to ask for each of you to ask yourselves, these questions, about, who you are, and what is it that makes you tick. And I'd also ask that you get or invest in a journal or a simple notebook and write down these answers. And I think each day or each week or month and year, I think you'll find a different you as you experience new things and get a bit older. Now, I just turned 52 years old a couple of days ago.
Well, happy birthday.
Thank you.
Yes.
What I learned is that I'm still on my inward and outward journey. And so
Absolutely.
that's also creative as well, because, a wise man is a person that says, I don't know everything, and I haven't experienced everything. So it's just a continuous journey. But again, finding your voice, knowing who you are, I think is the inner wellspring from where servant leadership can grow. And so
Yeah.
I just share that with everybody.
Yeah, and it's such a wonderful, such a wonderful message for so many reasons. As you were talking, it reminded me a lot of my own leadership journey, where, you come out of college, 2010, I was one way, and I felt so confident in such strength, right, in who I was. And then you learn a little bit as you go, and you're like, oh shoot, I actually don't know anything. And then it really does sort of shift how you view your place in the world and how you think others perceive you as a leader. So even in my own leadership journey, I find that these points of reflection have to happen over time, because you do evolve and you do grow as a person, and your leadership style may also slightly change as you change and grow as well. So self-reflection is probably one of my favorite things to do. I probably do it far too often, where people are like, maybe you should just wait a little bit on that. But no, I think that's such a wonderful message to leave our group with, is always think about who you are. Being authentic is 100% the way to go. And those moments where you feel like you haven't been yourself, compare them to the moments where you have, and see what outcomes have come from both of those scenarios. And I find that when I do those types of exercises in my mind, it only helps to build my confidence to be more authentic at the end of the day as well. So the last thing that I'm going to say is the book that I was referring to is The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. And it's truly a wonderful book. You don't have to read it from start to finish. You could just pick it up and open it and learn something about how to interact with people, which has been super helpful for me. And to your point about handshakes, I really miss handshakes, and I also really miss hugs. And I don't know what we're going to do without either one of those things, but we'll have to make do. All right. Well, Tony, this was such a pleasure and such an honor. I'm so grateful that we had some time to spend together. Tony and DCUC has been such a wonderful supporter of the Cooperative Trust and Crash. So we're so excited that we can continue this partnership. And in 2021, we will definitely be bringing you a Crash in person, which we're so excited about. Sorry we couldn't bring it to you guys this year, but if you ever have questions about the Cooperative Trust Crash, if you're a member of a Defense Council credit union or a team member and you have questions, you feel free to reach out to me, reach out to anyone on Tony's team. I'm sure they would love to chat with you. But until then, Tony, do you have any final words that you'd like to share?
Really just, always seek new information, because that helps you grow and look toward the future. And I'll leave you with this final thought. If you're always looking at the present through a rear view mirror, always just, whatever the past, then you'll always march backwards into the future. And so don't look at the future out your windshield and navigate looking out the rear view mirror. There's a much broader picture. It's exciting. And so always seek new information. And then just a foot stomp, just another thought about being yourself. Nobody's perfect. And so don't, wait to be perfect to make a play, right? Just be yourself while you're making it. And if you make mistakes, just be honest with yourself and move on. But get out there and lead. And I'm looking forward to reading about all your successes. And I think some of us are connected on LinkedIn, and I see wonderful things happening from those of you that have connected with me. But feel free to send me a connection, and I'd be happy to interact with you that way. I wish you all the best. Go out there and get it.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Tony. I really appreciate it. And again, just a quick reminder that we'll be meeting again August 26th with Brent Dixon, who is the current leader of I3, which is the credit unions community for solving some of the biggest problems that we all face. And he was also the creator of the Cooperative Trust. So a really exciting episode that we'll have on the 26th. We hope to see you all there. And thank you so much for joining us.
You bet. Thanks, Courtney.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to edit this end part out. So